Hi, so our project today is Project Green, and it is AI-augmented efficient and scalable forestation with GPS-enabled drones. My name is Siddhant Desai.
And my name is Om Desai.
So what is the problem that we're trying to solve with our project? So as you know, there's an urgent need to make forestation more accessible and more efficient. Existing research lacks the capabilities to pinpoint precise locations where we can plant trees. It's also difficult to obtain intelligent recommendations on what species of seeds to plant as well as where exactly to plant those seeds. This makes it hard to put this project to the next level by using drones to plant seeds.
To address this need, we wanted to create an AI and machine learning model that can help pinpoint where to plant trees with a high degree of precision. On top of that, we wanted to build a recommendation system that could recommend which seeds to plant and predict the chance of survival for each seed. We could do all this in an accessible, user-friendly way. When we first learned about Google Earth Engine, we were thrilled to see the data we could access, but we soon ran into some constraints. One of these constraints was the availability of public data. For example, one thing we wanted to have data for was whether if an area was sparsely vegetated, if that was intended, like it was a park or a football field, or if it was unintended, as in somewhere we could plant.
So let's look at some existing alternatives and the pros and cons associated with each alternative. The first alternative is Google Earth Engine. Google Earth Engine is great because it provides a lot of satellite data for the entire globe. It is also open API and open source. That means that anyone can access the data and use it to create their own models. However, what Google Earth Engine does not provide is it does not give specific accurate locations where exactly we can forest. In addition, it is hard to use for the average person and requires a lot of technical knowledge to create our own models and determine these locations. So let's look at some existing alternatives. The first alternative are classification models that are deployed on Google Earth Engine. These are great as they provide satellite data from all over the globe. They also are open API and open source, which means that anyone can access the data and use it to build their own models. However, some limitations of the classification models on Google Earth Engine are that they don't give you precise pinpoint locations to plant trees, and they are a little bit difficult to use if you don't have technical knowledge and make it hard for the average practitioner to use.
For the next part, recommending seeds to use and predicting their survival, we started diving deeper into gene ecology literature, but we realized it was a lot more complex than we'd originally imagined. For one, trees are mostly well adapted to their local climate, and that means if the survival and growth of trees is strongly correlated to the climate. This also means there are limits, which are often called seed zones, between where trees can generally grow. This introduces a lot of complexities, though, as with climate change, the climate is changing, and this means that sometimes the area where trees can grow, the seed zones, aren't static anymore, and trees might not be well adapted to their original climate. These complexities are why the seed lot selection tool, an existing tool, inspired us. It can basically recommend planting sites based on seed lots and account for future climate scenarios. However, the tool is only as good as the knowledge behind it. It can't learn from data. For example, if it can't detect if there are already trees or plants at the locations it recommends. It also can't produce new insights that can guide humans. Although it was a great starting point for future research, we realized we needed more knowledge, significantly more knowledge, due to the fact that climate is a moving target. We needed a radically new approach.
So let's talk about our solution. Project Green mashes multiple Google Earth Engine datasets as well as Azure's computer vision machine learning algorithms to detect general areas where sparse vegetation is present. We then augment our precision by applying a supervised machine learning algorithm that leverages high-resolution images as well as various satellite bands to determine precise locations where to plant trees. We then input these precise locations into the seed lot selection tool, as well as a more intelligent recommendation engine that we built to identify what species of seeds to plant in those areas.
To begin, we started with step 1, which was using Google Earth Engine to identify areas where trees could be planted in broad strokes. Then we moved on to step 2, where we used Google Earth Engine and Azure Machine Learning to build an AI machine learning classifier that could improve the precision of our model by categorizing areas as urban, heavily forested, or growable. Once we did that, we used Python and OpenCV2 to overlay this on satellite images to improve our precision by showing exactly where we could plant trees and being able to use that for recommendations. Once we did that, we moved on to the seed recommendation tool, where we inputted our geolocation into the seed lot selection tool and got seed lots that were recommended, after which we used RapidMiner to create a deep learning model that could predict the survival of certain seeds and recommend seeds accordingly. Sid will go into more detail about how we built our prototype.
So let's look at how we actually built our prototype and how it works. The first step was to gather satellite data, and from that satellite data, we wanted to remove cloud cover and water bodies, because these areas are not plantable for trees. The next step was to determine areas of sparse vegetation using NDVI. We then removed urban areas and human-managed areas such as golf courses, farmland, or parks where there are no trees intentionally from our output. We then displayed the result of this algorithm on an image such as the one seen here. As you can see, the areas in red are what represent what our model predicted as plantable. This excludes human-maintained areas like parks, fields, or golf courses. However, it often has false positives for areas such as small urban clusters or heavily forested vegetation. So how can we augment the precision of the output from step 1? We make it more precise by adding a machine learning classifier, which improves the precision by tagging or by classifying the output into 3 different categories. The first category is urban areas, the second category is densely forested areas, and the third category is sparse forestation where planting trees is possible. As you can see in this image below, the red represents urban, the green represents dense forestation, and the blue represents areas where our model detected we can plant trees. We trained our model using high-resolution images and satellite bands such as NDVI and thermal bands. So the next step is to overlay the output of our machine learning algorithm onto the output from step 1. We take areas that both models detected as forestable, and we only take the intersection of those areas and display it onto a high-resolution image like the one seen here. As compared to the output from step 1, you can see that the output of step 3 is much precise in locating which areas are forestable. We then take these precisely located areas and input them into the seed lot selection tool. The seed lot selection tool returns a variety of seed lots, and then we built our own deep learning algorithm using RapidMiner to recommend which seed lot to plant based on its survival prediction at the specific locations.
To execute this step, we built a deep learning model using a multi-layer feed-forward artificial neural network. And to do this, we used data provided by Derek J. Young and co-authors, who looked at trees that were planted in 3 areas that had just experienced wildfires and needed to be reforested, and he looked at the survival rates of these trees. And we combined this data with other data like species-related attributes, resources, soil, and climate as our input, and we put this all through a neural network containing millions of neuron-like connections, and starting with the input, it produced the output in 2 categories, whether it survived or didn't survive. And so we used 70% of the data to train the model, and 30% of this data to test the model. We chose to use the deep learning model because of an ability called feature hierarchy, which meant it could aggregate and recombine features, which made it really good for handling high-dimensional data sets with nonlinear or overlapping features, like our data set. We tested 150 different models, and out of them we found that the deep learning model performed the best. Part of this reason is that deep learning models can learn from their own mistakes and get better over time. That's why the model had an accuracy of 92% and an area under the curve of 0.91. This is because although the model started out bad, by learning from its mistakes, it got less bad over time. Now we'll talk about our findings, discussions, and conclusions. So for the first AIML model, the one that predicted which areas were plantable, we found that it had a 72% accuracy and that its precision was further refined by overlaying it over satellite data. For the model that could predict the chances of survival for seeds, it had a 92% accuracy and an area under the curve of 0.91. Next, we built another deep learning model that could predict tree growth, and we compared it to our original model that predicted tree survival, and we found that the attributes that were highest weight in both models, the ones that were most important to the growth and survival of the tree, were 1-year monitoring, shrub cover, species or seed lot ID, seed source elevation, site elevation, and soil moisture.
So we reviewed past reforestation efforts with varying levels of success to backtest the model. We found out that the key success factors were found to be very similar between those reforestation efforts and the ones that our deep learning model identified. We also went to 10 diverse locations near our towns, and we observed those locations to further validate our algorithm. We found that those areas that our model had detected as plantable were actually areas that were suitable for growing trees. We can also use this model in combination with GPS-enabled drones to go out and plant trees. This will provide an affordable, scalable, intelligent, and drone-friendly algorithm that provides a new and unique approach to planting trees and protecting the planet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.